Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Just a couple housekeeping things. I'm not sure if you're on your computer or your phone. There is a chat mechanism, and I have multiple windows on my computer, so I can see who signed in. If you raise your hand, there's the ability to do that, or you can type a message to chat, and I can see that, or you can just unmute yourself and yell out loud. All perfectly suitable ways to get attention. What I'm going to do is just spend a minute opening the meeting. Let me go through and talk about the agenda. Right now, we're in welcome and announcements. I think, depending on where you are in your journey, whether you're new or coming back the second year or here for the first time, um, some of you have got your bees, some of you are getting your bees, some of you want to get bees, and everything in between. We'll address that. If you are where I think you are probably, if you're brand new, planning to get your bees this week or the next week or so. And so we'll spend a little time because that's where we are in the program. So let's talk about that. If you go to the website for Managed Mentoring, if it's not clear, and I know there's some brand new names in here tonight, so I'm just going to spend a moment explaining it in a simple manner. Go to the home page, click on the first year program, and click on the month we're in, and it'll show you the lessons. I know some people just discovering the program come in April because they find the program and they find getting started to bees, and they don't realize that to get a proper start in beekeeping, really you should start back in January. That's when we open the program. So I know there's a lot of lessons, and I know some of the first ones are kind of long, but there's a lot of information to get you up and running. If you took a beginner's course, you got some of that information. And if you've already built your equipment and did some of that stuff, then maybe you could go look at those lessons at your leisure, and you can just join in the program right where we are. In January, we talked about things like what the equipment is, how to set it up, the types of equipment you could use, how to purchase it, where to get bees and things like that. What protective equipment. If you're starting here and you have the notion just now that you want to start bees and you have no place, no concept of where to start, actually go back to the beginning and get yourself sorted out that way. Now, we just finished March, and the beginning of April, we covered the second half of March. Second half of March was getting you primed to install your bees, whether you were buying a package or a nuke, and then how to care for them in the first week. And you could watch the lessons once, or you can watch them a couple times until you get comfortable. What I want to show real quick is, and let me see, you see the screen change? Somebody just give me a wave and say yes. Yeah, good. New lesson here. Dealing with improper wonky comb. Let me show you what I mean by this. If you're new to beekeeping, you may not be aware that I am way down on the bottom for some reason, that your comb would look like this. And I would implore you that if you belong to a beginner's beekeeper course or group on Facebook, you're going to see this every day for the next 2 months. People posting, well, why does my hives look like this, right? If you want to know why, go check this lesson out and it'll tell you how to prevent it and what is behind all that. So new lesson posted today. If you did your March lessons, you haven't seen this, I just added it to the page. And it's really, I think, an important one to know, especially if you're working with Plastic Foundation. So here we are in April, first week. Complete this by the middle of March. Interestingly enough, we were supposed to meet last week. There was no power at my house. The storm came through and we were without power for 2 days, so I had to postpone the meeting. We'll talk about this in a second. Let me come back to the presentation and say where we're at, okay? So we'll talk about a couple things for getting underway. I want to cover real quick how to light a smoker and just reinforce that for the new folks. It's probably the number one thing everybody struggles with. And then we will physically stay here until you ask all the questions you want. This is a safe place for new beekeepers to ask. And I have like Bob Kloss is a master beekeeper here and supports the program for training, and others may join along the way here. So we also have a couple people in the call who been with the program and got all they were going to get out of it and come back and help and support the program, paying it forward. So thanks to everybody who showed up. So let's go through and just talk about a couple quick things. You should have your March lessons complete, installing bees, nukes, post-installation stuff. Again, the wonky comb is out there. I would recommend you go get it. And I wanted to say from an announcement standpoint, if you're a Northwester, meaning part of Northwest New Jersey Beekeepers Association, or you're somewhere in our vicinity, we're having a live meeting in the Valley Crest Bee Yard this Saturday, 11 to 2. We'll stay later if we have to get everything done. We have a number of things: how to do a split, how to read hives, dead outs, how to assess a hive coming out of winter if you're a second-year person. For the new people, we are going to tear these hives apart. We're going to do hive inspections. We're going to show you what eggs and brood in all stages are and all of that stuff. So if you want to learn with live bees, with people who know how to work hives and get that tips and tricks, come stand shoulder to shoulder with us. Bob's going to be there. I'll be there. And I know a whole host of other Northwest senior beekeepers will be there to support the operation. We have 6, 7, about 8 hives to go through while we're there in 2 different yards. So should be some fun activities. Let's talk about bringing bees home. Several of you are probably in that state where you're going to go get your bees. The lesson covers asking you, like, were they treated, knowing how you're going to pick up your bees. I'm going to tell you right now that whether you're picking up a nuke or a package, when you typically go to an apiary and there's a bunch of bees present, other bees will come in and find it. A package of bees is sealed. The bees can't get out from wherever they were packaged from, but that doesn't mean errant bees aren't in and about. And when you pick that package up and put it in your vehicle, it's highly likely you're going to have bees flying around. Consider a garment bag. You can go buy that at Walmart or someplace and put your package inside before you put it in the car, and any errant bees get trapped inside of that, and it doesn't create heat problems with sealing things off. I always tell people to always have blue tape available, and this is not a silly suggestion. You may not ever take it out of the vehicle, but bring your gloves, your veil, your suit, just in case something goofy goes on, bees get loose inside your car. You could pull over to the side of the road, put your gear on, and then drive home like a spaceman and not get lit up. If you have an errant bee flying around in the car, typically they're going to fly to the windows. If they get up to the windows right behind you, just roll the window down, pull over, they'll fly out. You can go on your merry way. Know that you may potentially get stung. Don't cross the center divider and do any of that. It's not the end of the world to get stung. Don't be swatting at them and doing whatever. Deep breath, pull over. If you have loose bees, open the windows, let them out. Maybe you open the trunk and so on. I think next couple days we should have decent weather. It was hot today, it got to 70 something. If you put bees in the trunk of a normal car and leave them there for a period of time on a day like today, you're going to cook them. So make sure that you take into account what the temperature's like while you're transporting your bees. I'm going to ask for just a quick survey. Anybody going to get bees this week? Just pop your meeting chat, say yes, me, or give a wave of the hand through the chatty mechanism thing. Are you going to get them at some point in the near future? You could add that too if it's not this week. It doesn't have to be this week, but you have bees on order. Okay, good. Looks like a bunch of you are right in that. Okay. One of the things that I'll say to you is just as a refresher before you go out the door, if you want, you can go over and, look at the lessons for ordering bees and things like that and get a couple of those tips just to refresh yourself before you go. In the sourcing bees, there were the questions to ask the provider to make sure that you know it and tips about going to pick up. We just did a Cliff Notes version of it. So the good news is there's a whole bunch of you lined up to go get bees, and that's kind of cool. And I don't want to regurgitate the entire lesson, but when we get to Q&A, whatever questions you have, this is the place to ask them. Some might be unicorns and just installed bees. And for all of you who are just about to pick up bees, you're eventually going to get to this moment where you're going to put your bees in the box and then wonder what's next. Just some quick guidance. Christoph, I'm assuming you're raising your hand because you are getting bees. If you had a question, just feel free to unmute and shout. Same with anybody else if you have questions. I'm going to cover this. I only have like 3 or 4 slides. I don't want to take up all the time yakking at you. So put your queen in. Make sure you remove the cork. The number one thing people forget. It's not a catastrophe if you don't remove the cork and you go back a week later and find out it's there. You just pull it and you'll just be delayed a little bit. No big deal. You want to feed your bees. We put in the lessons of recommendation, assuming you're using a 10 frame hive, that feeder goes in 10, internal feeder. It's still cool at night. When I got up this morning at 4:30, it was, I want to say 38 degrees. If you have a feeder on top or a feeder out front or other ways where you're doing your feeding, it could potentially get chilled. But if it's in the box with the brood and they're generating some warmth, it's probably a better scenario to keep that a more viable temperature range for the bees to take it in. You do want to feed your bees to get them going, but you don't want to overfeed your bees. So when you inspect, look that the frames are not full of nectar every cell, especially in the brood area where the queen is operating and you're seeing brood being prepared. That should be open. All the cells should be polished by the bees, and the queen should lay a consistent pattern from the center out. If you see nectar stored in there, you're feeding too much, just back it down a little bit. They'll clean the nectar out, open it up, and then the queen will get back to work. 1-to-1 sugar solution is what you feed in the springtime. It's the closest to what you get out in nature, meaning the ratio of how much the sugar concentration is. It's 1 part sugar to 1 part water. Just stir together warm water and sugar until it dissolves. It doesn't matter whether you weigh the sugar in water or whether you do it by volume, 1 gallon to 1 gallon of sugar. It's irrelevant. Just a 1-to-1 ratio. That's the right mix for spring. One thing that I will say is make sure if you're going to do an inspection, you smoke the hive properly. You start with a single box. I think you would have a entrance excluder on the front when you install a new package, or new, just to keep it so it's defensible, you'd put a little puff in the front entrance, and then you would pull the roof and put a little puff in the hole in the inner cover, then use your hive tool and pull the inner cover off, put both of those off to the side for safekeeping. And when you look at the top of the frames, if there's bees all over the top of the frames, just a little puff, 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 puff across the top of the frames, and all the bees will retract. If you don't give that puff, they're all going to be staring at you out of the seams. You'll see a bunch of eyeballs lined up across in the seam. And as soon as you go in and make connection with the hive, they'll probably jump off and come out at you. Push them down. Smoke the hive just a little bit. Now don't gas them, just a puff, puff, puff is all you need. And anytime you're working your frames and you go to put your hive tool in the end to pry the hive tool up, just give a puff right there. It clears the bees and you don't smash any when you go to put your hive tool in. If you watch the lessons, we teach you to pull frame number 2. So the frame comes out, the face and the face are bees on bees. If you pull frame number 1, it's bees on one side, the far side, and it's bees on woodenware, the inside of the box, and you'll crush the bees as you roll that frame out. So go to frame number 2, put it in your frame hanger, and then when you have that gap out, you can then pull the frames into the gap and work your way in. Now, when you install a brand new package, chances are those outside frames aren't going to have a lot of bees on them, and they're not going to be propolis in, and you could probably just pluck it out. But in time, if you follow that same practice, you will become used to, this is how I make entry. Now, one thing I want to say to everybody is it's still cool. 60 degrees when they're trying to keep the brood nest at 95 or 98 degrees is cold, drafty. You want to get in, do your business, and get out. When using an entrance reducer, do you wedge it between the bottom board and first box? Everybody's equipment is a little bit different. That 3/4 inch gap that sits underneath the front face of the top of the bottom box and the bottom board should technically be snug, but allow you to slide the entrance reducer in. I'm answering a question in chat, by the way. If you have to, sometimes you have to use your hive tool and prop that box up, put the entrance reducer in, and then set the box down on it. It depends on your equipment. So the short answer is, do you wedge it between the bottom board and first box? Yes. You could use a small entrance, you could use the medium entrance, or you could pull it out and leave it wide open. Most of the time when you install a nuke, you can leave the wider entrance. When you install a package to help them defend, you want to use the small one. And then in time, when you see constant traffic and bees patrolling the front entrance at the landing, and you don't want to block the progress of all the foragers coming and going because there's a bottleneck, you can open the entrance wider or just take the entrance reducer out. But in the beginning, we recommend you do put an entrance reducer in. When you first put your colony in, leave them be, especially if they have to release the queen. You want to let them get acclimated. You want them to be walking all over the equipment, leaving their footprint pheromone and getting used to this is their home. If you open the box all the time, they're going to see that as an intrusion. And in nature, if that happened, they might abscond and you don't want your bees flying out. So put them in there and leave them be for the first 8-10 days, and then go and do your inspection if you had a package check to see whether your queen is out, and then carry on your inspections every 7 to 10 days. I'm going to ask a question. Anybody pick up their bees? And if so, were there any surprises? It's pretty early to ask this question, but maybe, I know talking to somebody last week, they already got their bees. So you can unmute yourself or type something in chat.
So I picked up my bees this last Saturday.
Uh-huh.
I got 3 packages, and
Where'd you get them from, Jason?
so I live in North Carolina,
Okay.
and anyway, I got them installed on Saturday. I actually went into the hives earlier today just to see if the queens were out, and all three of them were the queens were out.
Good.
Um, they're all on brand new foundation,
Mm-hmm.
and they're already building comb. I did notice, and you actually kind of answered this question. One of the questions I had is I noticed in a lot of the cells that they're building out that they are collecting nectar.
Yeah.
So should I hold off on the feeding then?
If it's not keeping them from building brood, then you're okay. But if everything's covered to the point where the queen can't lay eggs, then yes. And typically they will put nectar in and around. If you see the video or the presentation where it says trust the rainbow, I'm not sure if you saw that yet.
Yeah.
They'll situate the brood nest in the middle. They'll put a band of pollen around the outside and they'll store nectar up in the corners. That'll be the center of the brood nest. They should do that on both sides as they build out. The frame in the periphery will be usually a combination of nectar and pollen, and then they'll store nectar to the outside. Now, you're in the case where there's still probably 4 or 5 frames of foundation they haven't gotten anywhere. So
Exactly.
they'll only have a choice to put it in the cells. They'll manage it themselves, but you don't want them to be nectar bound. So just kind of look at it and make your assessment. If you see nectar all over the place and you don't see brood in progress, then you want to slow it down.
So I'm using bucket feeders on the top of the hive,
Yeah.
and I noticed in one of the hives they've already, it's been what, 5 days since I've opened them. They've already completely emptied the bucket.
Yeah, they'll take it down. They'll hoard it. They'll hoard it. So this is key, Jason. Whatever you feed them, they're going to use it. They love to hoard whatever they can, whether it's good for them or not. They're not going to squander it. But in some cases, too much is a good thing. They'll only need a cup a day for the entire colony when you install a package. They really don't need that much food. If you feed them a cup or two and you find that the frames are dry, then give them a little bit more. But on the opposite side, if you filled the feeder and they downloaded it all and they've got it stored all over the place and they can't build brood, then you're holding yourself back and you want to back off a little bit. So just read the frames from that standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's only been 5 days. I didn't see any eggs. I didn't see any, brood or anything yet.
Okay.
But I did notice in a lot of this, like I said, a lot of the cells did have nectar in them.
How much have they built out in 5 days?
So I didn't go through frame by frame. I was focused on the center frames, where I had the queen cage. And so out of the center 3 or 4 frames, they probably had, the center 2 were probably about 50% built out on both sides. And then the next, the next outer 2 had a little bit, but not very much.
Okay. Yeah, and then they'll build double that in short order. You'll be surprised how quickly if they got started right away for you, then you should do pretty well.
Yeah, I was just worried because, like I said, I had that one hive particularly that's gone through the whole gallon bucket already, and I was wondering, do I need to put more sugar on, or can I hold off a little bit?
Yeah,
Or
I would let them dry out a little bit. I mean, that's really where you're at is you have to meter how much you're feeding them. If you feed them a gallon and they take down a gallon and there's a gallon stored in all the comb, but there's no place for them to operate, then you need to back that down.
okay,
And you just judge it by reading the comb. Now, this is the funny thing about it. Sometimes they'll store it and other times they eat it. And so if they're eating it, consuming it, and they're using it to build the wax, then you're doing a good thing by giving them a gallon. So really the measurement is your visual inspection. Are they storing it? And if they are storing it, is it in overabundance that it's hampering the operation of development of the colony?
right,
And the way you know that is if there's an area where the queen is laying eggs and in that area, you're seeing nectar being stored next to an egg, then you know that you have a little too much.
Okay.
And so you would slow down feeding until you get it to Goldilocks, just right, not too little and not too much.
So if I were to slow down, in other words, not put any more on, when should I go back and check again? How should I wait 10 days or?
Yeah, still, again, you don't want to keep disturbing them. So every 7 to 10 days, take your read and make your best guess after you read what you see.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah. If you said you're using a top feeder, it's
Correct.
probably warm enough in North Carolina, but New Jersey, that might be chilled on the overnight. Another tip for everybody is if you are feeding and you're in a cold climate, mid-Atlantic, north of us, even further, and it gets cold at night, that liquid will get chilled. Maybe in the full sun on a 70 something degree day, it'll warm up to the point where it'll get to a point where the bees can take it. But your better chance is to just feed them a little bit, let them go through that, and come back in a couple of days and give them a little bit more. Give it to them in the morning and have them consume it by night, and don't have the excess stored on the overnight. Now, as we get into May and the overnight temperatures go from 45 to 50 and above, then you can just not have to worry about this micromanage of feeding. The other thing too is I I'm imagining for you, Jason, it's game on, right? Your trees are probably starting to bloom and you're seeing leafing out. We don't have that here yet.
I mean,
But we're close.
yeah, I'm a gardener, so my garden is actually in full swing. I'm going to be harvesting strawberries here in the next week. It's
Yeah.
great.
Okay. And so Jason provides a good lesson for all of us is that when the time comes that the nectar flows in full bloom, the apple trees are in bloom. Right now, all of the cherry trees are amazing here in New Jersey. There's nectar out there. When the nectar comes from nature and it goes like this, like way up, then you may not have to feed as much. Even if you were feeding a small amount, metering it, you may not have to feed it all. They may not take it. And if you have top feeders or internal feeders and you want to slow it down, just leave them dry. Don't add as much. Maybe you just put a little splash in there so that they know it's always there. But you don't have to keep that internal feeder topped off all the time. Just meter it back down. So looking at the rest of the questions, did you follow the install guide? Did you see our install guide when you put your package in?
Yeah, yeah.
Any difficulties or questions about what it said?
No, everything went pretty straight. Didn't have any issues or problems. Pretty smooth.
Good. Did you get any stings?
I did not get any stings at all. So I am not a brand new beekeeper. I have had bees before.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, I've been rather casual in the past. This time I'm trying to take a more active, proactive, perspective and be more involved. I had 2 hives last year. One didn't even make it through summer. It absconded, it left. The second hive, I think I lost it somewhere in the October timeframe. And again,
Mhm.
I went in, there were no bees in the hive, so they absconded. They left. But I'm trying to be a little bit more proactive this time around and have my bees survive the winter.
So you give me the first opportunity to say that there's lessons coming up that talk about the varroa mite management, specifically the perfect storm and the time when you need to spend utmost attention at managing varroa mites so that you have clean winter bees to overwinter. It's probably the most important part to survival, and make sure that when summertime comes and everybody's on vacations or whatever, that's the time you need to really take care of your bees. So stay on top of the lessons, especially the summer management ones, and you should fare a little bit better.
Will do. Thanks.
Yeah, I wanted to answer the question for Katie. If you're a Northwestern and you're coming out, let me know. I have tons of wax. I can give you just blocks of wax to use if you're looking for some. Anybody else in this boat? Any other commentary for this? So let's talk about a couple quick things. You're now to April. Your next lessons will be hive inspections, hive tools, things you'll see, feeding new colonies. So some of what we're talking about feeding is in there. And it's important. One of the things we see with people who keep bees and have challenges with crushing bees and bees being aggressive and just that discomfort with working the hives has so much to do with how to use a hive tool and how to pull the frames up and how to use your smoker, that thing that I said where you smoke the end bar and then put your hive tool in after the bees have retracted. How you use the curved end and put it in between and you turn it and that pulls the frames apart. Most people don't know that's how you actually use a hive tool. So learn your basics and follow those lessons on how to do a hive inspection. And I know some people join midstream. Back in February, there was equipment to buy, and we recommend you use a frame hanger, especially if you're using Langstroth hives. We would like you to take your frame out and put it on the frame hanger away from the box so the bees don't come off. And then that open gap from frame number 2 or frame number 8, depending on how you work your hive from the back, provides the ability for you to pull the frames that you're working into space. And then you could just reverse the process. But you can't do that without a frame hanger. Now you could take the frame and you could take it and set it down on the ground, put it on the far side of the hive and leave it up against your cinder block or hive stand. But really the better way to do it is invest in a frame hanger. They're really simple to use. So yeah, Emily, that's fine. Let me know. I have to remember I'll put them in the kit. And if you're coming this weekend, I'll have them on hand. Maybe Bob, you can keep me honest and bring some too in case I forget, but I won't. I'll make a note of it. So go check out the lessons for the first half of April. The things you can see is an interesting one because a lot of times you stand over your hive after going through your training course back in December, January, and you open it up and you start pulling up frames. And I've seen this deer in a headlight look from new beekeepers like, I don't know what I'm looking at. Is that the queen? And they're pointing at a drone because the drone is big and it looks different from the workers. So maybe that's the queen. Go through those slides. There's a bunch of different things that you'll see. You're going to see queen cups, for example. If you don't know what that is, when you pull the frame up and you're looking around, you're going to see this thing and be in wonderland. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Go through the lesson and pick all the stuff out and watch it a couple times, or just before you go do the inspection, open the PDF and scan through it and just remember the things that you're about to see, and then go out and physically live in wonder at seeing them directly. So I want to come back to one of the questions in chat about when do you remove the feeder? In the lessons, we say you build out frames 1 through 9. And then you do that exchange where you take frame 1, which is likely not built, and 9, which is on the other side, likely not built. And you perform that procedure where you rotate them inbound, and you take a built frame 3 and frame 7 perhaps, and you move that to the outside. When you move frames that are not built in closer to the brood, the tendency is the bees will build those. As they start to build those frames, when you have 1 through 9 built, you're ready to put the top box on. One of the first operations of putting the top box on is pull the inner feeder out and put the new frame, not built yet, never been in the box, in a position where it's inbound, and move the built frames to the outside. So you might have 1 through 6 built. 7 is now the new frame. And then 8, 9, 10 are the ones that were also built in your bottom box. You take your top box, new one, all full of 10 frames of foundation, and you put it on top. You pull frame number 10 and you put the feeder in there. So you pull it out of the bottom box and now you put it in the top box and you continue to feed them until they do the same thing in the top box, fill everything out. And then when it gets to the point where all your frames are built in the top box, you could pull your feeder out, or some beekeepers physically leave the feeder in all the time. Your preference. We recommend that when you get to the top box, at some point when the weather is warmer, you could pull that feeder out, and then we say top feeders are the way to go. We recommend the Kelly style top feeder, because on the top feeder, you can put it over top of your hive. And when you want to feed, you just pull the roof off and pour in. The bees can't get through the feeder and out, and you're free to feed for the whole summer and any other time. And then as winter comes, you would take that feeder off and put it in your garage. And if you had to feed for whatever reason, you could always go back to the internal feeder. So any questions on some of that feeding stuff that I just said? Feel free to ask for clarity. I like that, Scott. You could take your second brood box without bees. Okay. Let me answer that one question. And yes, Vanessa, I'll just bring up a pile of wax and anybody that wants it. I just recently melted all this errant wax that I had that I've been harvesting, and I have them ready-made blocks. I'll be happy to give you some. One of the questions in there is, do you ever use a feeder as a water source? Actually, one of the tips that we give is a lot of people buy kits and they come with the Boardman feeder. That's the name of the person who invented the feeder that looks like an inverted mayonnaise jar that slides in at the entrance. We recommend against using a Boardman feeder for feeding. Putting sugar water at the entrance creates the ability for bees to detect that, and they're going to rob the hive. It's an incentive for robbing. But what you can do, and it will not entice marauders, is put water in that. The only knock against that is that they drain it rather quickly and you constantly have to come back and fill it. But yes, you can use feeders to administer water, especially those if you happen to have them laying around. What we say to you, and what we said in the last lesson, and we'll repeat it here, is as you set your bees up, look, scan your neighborhood. Anybody that has a pool nearby that gives off that chlorine smell will be an enticement to the bees to know that there's water there. And so you want to set a water source between your hives and the neighbor's pool, or even your pool. Put a bucket out, regular, everyday Home Depot bucket. You're going to take a drill and drill a couple holes around the top of the hive so that if the water comes in, instead of overflowing, it will go out the holes. And then you're going to put some floaties in. You could put corks, you could put wood, you could use old polystyrene packing, shipping, peanuts. And the key is when you drill holes, the water doesn't overflow and all your floaties go over and end up on the ground next to the water bottle. You could set these out all around your property, put a couple, like a capful of chlorine bleach. It won't hurt the bees, but it'll give enough scent into the air that the bees flying over will detect it and come down. They land on the floaties, and then they walk in and get a sip of water. They will not usually go to your hummingbird feeders because the ratio of sugar water is not enticing, but if they're really thirsty, they would. You might find them at your bird baths. To make that water even more enticing, just put a little pinch of salt in it. They don't mind. In fact, they prefer salty water. Not crazy, not ocean water salty, but just a little bit. So Set your water out now. You want them to find the water before they find alternative water sources, because once they lock onto your neighbor's pool, they're not coming back. They're constantly going to go there. And if you find that for some reason you lost the battle, and one of the things, our pool cover's still on. And when it rains, which it seems to rain every day anymore, all the water collects on the pool cover. And that water is covered with leaves and it has a little bit of sliminess to it, if you know what I mean, because of the algae and whatever that grows on top of the cover. And that smells amazing to bees. I see bees all the time on our pool cover. And as soon as you take the pool cover off, guess what? The bees are going to come to the pool. So you need to get your water out now. Tell your neighbors, if you can, that it would be great if they keep the water off the pool cover. Or if they see a bee come, the bee is a scout and it's going to report where the water is. They could pinch or kill the one occasional bee that comes here and there. And that might prevent everybody else from the colony orienting to come to the neighbor's pool. Let me answer a couple of these questions. The Kelly feeder, if you look in the things you should buy, is a regular box. It looks like a medium, and it has a plastic trough in it, and it's 2 chambers. One, and it has a hump in the middle, and 2. If you look in any catalog, you'll see them. They're top feeders. It was invented by the Walter T. Kelly Company, and so they were commonly monikered as Kelly feeders. Everybody knows that that's what they're called. Now, Kelly's out of business, so I don't know if people still call them, but look in a catalog for a top feeder and you'll find it. It's a regular medium box and it has a plastic insert that has 2 troughs in it. That's a top feeder and it's generally called a Kelly feeder for Aaron. Christoph asked, do you feed a second-year hive? Not usually. Let's talk about hives coming out of winter. Hive coming out of winter, as you'll see at the mentoring yard if you come this week, have 3 states. They're a runt, they're fair to midland, or they're banging. For the fair to midland, the middle of the road ones, and the banging ones, you certainly don't need to feed them. If they came out hanging on by their fingernails, and they're 2 frames of bees, not even a 5-frame nuke, you might want to go to a banging hive and pull some resources out and give it to the runt, or feed them to stimulate them. When you have a hive coming out of winter that's really small, chances are there's some condition that caused that. Often enough, it's an older queen who didn't lay as much population, or they had a mite impact and some of the colonies succumbed to being sick, but they made it through. Usually with good food, meaning lots of fresh pollen and a nectar flow, a hive like that will be a little slower than everybody else, but they will recover quite quickly. If you find that they're not recovering, one of the first things you should do is look at replacing your queen. Now, do you want to feed them? Yes. Do you want to feed a moderate hive? If you have objectives as a second-year beekeeper to make splits and to do queen rearing, and you want that colony, the moderate one, to be everything it can be, you could feed it. Most people don't. Most people don't want to feed. It's work. From that standpoint, it's really kind of beekeeper discretion. Runty hives, yeah, you should feed that a little bit. Give them a little boost. And better yet, equalize with a really strong hive by taking some of the bees out of the strong hive and adding it to the runter hive and see if you can get them restarted. I think the next thing is really just open Q&A. We can go through everybody here and you ask whatever question you want, and Bob and I and others would be happy to answer anything that you want to talk about. Jason.
Sorry, I don't want to like monopolize the whole meeting.
Nope, no monopoly. You're free to ask as many questions as you want. That's what we're here for.
So I don't know if you recall, but I was actually in the meeting that we had a couple of weeks ago, and
Yep.
one of the questions I had was around old crusty comb. Um,
Mhm.
I had inherited a lot of old comb, and you know, you recommended setting up a solar wax melter. You gave me a
Yeah.
link, whatever. I actually did go out and create it. I built a solar wax.
Good.
Um,
That's cool.
just built it a couple days ago, but I haven't had an actual chance to use it yet because it's been a little cooler and overcast, and haven't really had any sun to go out and try it yet.
Yeah, it takes a really sunny day and a little bit of warmth for that thing to kick in, but it'll go.
So I'm hoping this weekend.
How
However,
cool is that?
I've been going through these the frames, you know, this older stuff, and I have several frames that have capped honey on them.
Mhm.
Um, should I set those out for the bees to clear out the honey, or what's the best way to deal with these are older frames. They're probably 4 or 5 years old. They have capped honey on them. I can't really extract it and use the honey myself because they're brood frames. And so
Mhm.
I don't know what else is in the honey. Um, but can I set those out and let the bees just clear them out, or is that going to incite them and cause robbing, or what's the best way to handle those frames?
Yeah, so okay. Couple schools of thought there. First question I'm going to ask you, just the context. How big is your property?
Um, just under half acre,
Okay.
but
So,
I'm on the end of our neighborhood, and it's actually a large wooded area behind us. There's no houses behind us or anything.
okay. So this is where I was going to go with that is when you put that out, one of the things, the first thing is if you just set out a frame, it may or may not attract bees. But if you scratch the capping and allow the honey to leak, you'll find a lot of bees will find it. And like that, they'll come. You're going to get a cloud of bees around that frame. And if you have a smallish property and you put it somewhere near the edge of your property, it's going to get rather exciting for you and your neighbors. I have a couple of acres and I have farm fields alongside of me and behind me. If I put mine out, nobody is the wiser. So do know for everyone that whenever you put stuff out in your property, when I say a cloud of bees, it's a frenzy like you have never seen before. It's crazy. And so you want to be a little judicious about that. Now, maybe you could let the bees do the work for you. So if you have an extra box, take the extra box, put that frame in it, scratch the capping so it drips a little bit, and put it over top of your inner cover and put the roof on it. Put another inner cover on it, seal it from the top so no bees can get in. They can only come in from the bottom, and put the roof on it. You may even go as far as taping everything just to make sure there's no oopsies. And the bees will come up from the bottom and clean that frame out and bring it back down. That's one option. The other option is you can cut it and you're going to get rid of the comb, sounds like anyway, and do crush and strain. And the honey that comes out, you can dilute it with water and feed it back to your bees, just like you feed sugar solution, but instead you're just watering it down to a consistency where the bees can take it that way. Those are two options for you. I don't know, Bob, if you want to offer any other insightful ideas.
I like your first idea. I mean, the idea is you could feed it back to them. So you actually could just, depending on the time of year, like right now, if you put frames out, chances are they're not going to clean them up and if they do, it's not going to be very quickly because there's a lot of other nectar sources out there. But when we're in a dearth, that is when there's not a lot of nectar out there, you could put those frames into a hive and they will clean them out the way Kevin just said.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just be careful when you scratch them that you don't like have honey running down through the hive and out the front entrance and whatever. That would really make a mess. Just a little light scratch here and there to open it up. Maybe a little bit of a drip is all you require. You don't need to carve it all off and put it in there super wet. It'll run all over the place and make a mess. They'll clean it up, but it might be rather exciting for a while if honey's running out the front entrance.
Yeah, and like I said, I don't have a problem with that. It's all woods back behind me, and so my hives are located along the tree line back there. So, you know, they're actually pretty far away. My neighbors are pretty understanding. Of course, we bribe them with honey all the time, so they
Yeah, that's nice.
but you know, I have several of these frames that are capped honey, and I you know, like I said, they're probably 4 or 5 years old. I just don't know what to do with them. But um, and I do know that there are other beehives in the area. There's actually a commercial beehive, uh, uh, you know, outfit that's maybe a mile away from where we are, and so there are a lot of bees in the area. They have over 50 hives there at that location. And so, you know, I know if I put them out there, I know I will attract bees, and there will be bees, and they'll clean it out. But I'm just wondering, is that gonna is there possible negative effect to my hives if we have a lot of other bees that are coming in to clean those out?
Yeah, so one of the things I'll tell you from experience, I had a piece of comb. It was probably 6 by 6 inches full of honey. And I had brought it in. It was a wonky comb thing that I had taken off. I was coming down from the apiary and I set it on my barbecue grill. I went in the house. I wasn't in there but 4 minutes. And when I came back out, the frenzy they found it, it was astonishing. And the bees were killing each other, trying to get to it. And it just looked like a roiling mess. So when you put something out in there, now the funny thing is where you are, say North Carolina, where there's forage, they may or may not be interested in that. But for everybody else, when you're in a dearth, a lack of nectar being provided by nature, and you put something like that out, it's going to be bedlam. You'll have bees coming for miles. Maybe yours, maybe not. There'll be dead bees all over the place because they physically attack each other in order to get to it, which is why the cleaner way to do it is to put it over your hive and just make sure that the colony can access it from below. Now, the part where you cut the frame out and do crush and strain, then you can separate the honey from the wax, but you still end up with wax that has honey all over it. You could take that and put it in like a chafing tray and put that outside. It's not the same as putting comb out. They will scrabble all through it. In fact, they'll clean it so well that you'd be like amazed at how they gnaw at every single bit of wax and clean every inch speck of honey out of it, and you'll be left with this fine wax shavings. It's astonishing.
Right.
Just spread it out really far as much as you can, and it shouldn't be saturated. And you could put that out on your property and it won't create the same kind of frenzy. It'll be busy, you know, but you could do it that way.
Okay. Thanks.
Scott, did you want to ask a question related to that? Or did we get your answer? Scott disappeared on my screen. So let me answer the question for Vanessa.
No, I'm
Oh,
still
there you
here. I was just
Okay.
talking on mute, Kevin.
Okay.
I went ahead and lowered my hand, forgot to take off the microphone. No, I have a very similar question. And for the group, I had 2 hives. I ended up with, from what I'm understanding, is called a mite bomb, and lost my stronger hive in a matter of weeks in October. Now, coincidentally, kind of like Jason was saying, is that hive had 2 full boxes of resources: capped honey, pollen, nectar, and then of course died out. Now I have all that. In fact, very little open comb. I'm getting a package here in a couple weeks. One of the other, because I thought about putting the frames out and letting open feed. I've got about an acre that I could get, you know, a couple 100 yards from my hives. But what do you think about starting my package automatically in 2 boxes, putting the package in the lower box with drawn comb, some resources, and a top box full of resources? And then I can almost super, you know, after they get oriented.
Yeah. So first off, for everybody, Scott's in Colorado. and it's still cold there.
It's cold here.
I don't love that idea, Scott. I think too much is too much. I would,
Okay.
if you're doing a package, I would keep them small and compact. And they can do a better job at holding on to any residual heat that they have in one box. But if you put them in the bottom box and all the heat's going up into the top box, it's going into no man's land. And in your cold climate, they're going to struggle a little bit to build out. I think they would do better and be more operational in a single box. And then as they start, they'll build quickly. So you need to stay on top of them,
Yeah.
right? But when you get to 6, 7, 8 frames, then by that time it should be a little warmer for you and you can put on that box. And they have at that point generated enough critical mass that they'll be able to take the heat and deal with extra space up above them when you add the second box.
Well, and that's kind of, I actually hadn't given as much temperature or thought to the temperature because I was thinking more for space, because what I can do, because the box I was planning to put them in is fairly drawn out already. So
Mhm.
what I can do is I can add in a couple empty frames or just foundation and give them that to play with for a few weeks until we get warm nights. Our days are actually pretty nice here, but you know, our winters here have a way of stepping out the door and coming back for one more show. But we're getting 70 degree, or we're breaking 70 degrees next week, but it's still
Nice.
getting into 30-degree nights. So I'll do that. I'll go ahead and put in some empty frames. I'll let them build those out, and then I won't need to put a second
I
box
would
on.
wait, Scott. I would go the other way. Give them all the drawn comb and let them grow quickly as a comb.
But it's full. All the comb I have is full of pollen, nectar,
That's
or
okay.
honey.
They'll use it all in their growth to full size.
Okay.
They'll empty that comb for you. And then they'll get to critical mass faster. And then when you get to the second box and you start putting foundation frames, they'll build one of them a day like this.
Oh, okay.
For the other side, it'll be a slower crawl. You might as well let them get bigger with the taking advantage of the comb. And then when they have critical mass, give them foundation and they'll pop it up for you quickly. And then the faster growth in the second box by building out that foundation for you might mean a nectar flow and some honey collection even. So I would go the other way. Give them the built stuff and let the colony grow to the biggest strength they can, and then supplement them with foundation and they'll build it out really quickly.
Perfect. Will
Any
do.
counter to that, Bob, or do you think that's the right logic?
No, I would go with you.
Yeah. Okay.
Good
I
stuff.
want to answer Vanessa's question about getting a bee brush. Yes, I love bee brushes. And I find that, I'm against something called a unitasker, which is you buy it, it has one purpose and you hardly ever, never take it out of your kit. I could think of dozens of times where I've used my bee brush. And, one of the things about a bee brush you want to keep in mind is sometimes you want to take a frame and inspect it for, let's just make this up, queen cells. You shake the frame over the hive and all the bees drop off, but there's a couple left over. Or maybe you want to transfer that frame to somewhere else, but you don't want to take any bees. Reach in your kit, take your bee brush out and flick the bees off and get them all off. Now, one thing to think about, I know you can all see me, I think. No, you're looking at the share. Let me stop sharing for a moment. Now I'm assuming you could see me. Can you see me? Yeah. Okay. Cells are not built straight like this. Cells are built like this. They have a little tilt to them. By nature, you don't want the nectar to flow out, so the bees are smart enough to build it with a little bit of a tilt, right? And so as they built it with a tilt, they're going to go into the cell. If you're flicking the bees or brushing them, and you're brushing them from the top and their heads in, you're pushing against them here. But if you're brushing them from the bottom, you're pulling them up out of the cell. So when you use a bee brush, do not brush. I know that's so counterintuitive, but it's not a sweep. You don't sweep with a bee brush. You flick, 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 flick. And when you flick up the face of the comb, because remember how they're set. If a bee is in cleaning a cell or doing something and you brush across, you're going to drag that bee across the frame. That's no good. But if you flick from the bottom, the ones that are on there will pop off, and the ones who are head in that you happen to capture, you'll actually pull them out of the cell and then fling them in the air and they'll fly and go away. And you do no damage to them. So yes to a bee brush and use it properly. Flick, don't sweep with it. Sweep just grinds the bees across the frame and it really pisses them off. They don't like that at all. They'll get very defensive. Anything that you see in the bee catalog is suitable. So, Karen's been patient with her hand up. So go ahead, Karen.
Hi. All right. I feel like I have a big question. So we went in our hives late March, just gave a peek. We have two, and both of them were about 8 frames full looking down. So we were pretty excited,
Nice.
thinking that we were going to do a split. And then when we went to go and do a split on the one hive, they had killed all the brood. There was a big pile outside the nest, and they'd completely cleaned the whole hive out.
So are you sure the hive wasn't being robbed? And when you look down
I
in it,
found the queen and everything.
yeah. And now they're
They're
toast.
bringing pollen in. They're good. They seem like they're okay.
But what did you find at the entrance? I'm
A
confused.
pile of all of the fruit that they pulled out of the capped.
So they went through and cleaned out all the capped brood. So a couple things. I'm just going to make some stuff up, but I'm taking educated guesses because the reason I'm guessing is I wasn't there, so I can only speculate. When a hive goes through winter, a lot of bees die. They're all on the bottom board, and the undertakers have to drag all those out. So you're going to find dead bees as they get operational and they clean all that out. When a colony is occupying a space in the early season, when they have momentum, they'll start to grow and grow and grow. And then a cold front will come and sit in. And they have to, when it's 45 degrees or lower, contract and come back in. When they contract and come back in, there are times when they've expanded out and built brood over here. And when they contract, they had to abandon it. Then when it gets warm and they get operational, they come back out, but all that brood died because it got chilled and they have to pull it out, clean it, and you might find that at the entrance. That contraction is not normal, but a lot of times when you have a warm spring or a warm winter and they build and build and build, and then you get that late winter cold snap and they contract, you might find that. And some colonies may not have started out that brood, but ones that have 8 or 9 frames may have. And then when they contracted, they had to abandon it and leave it behind. That creates a lot of stress for the bees, but it's just a byproduct of temperature sometimes, especially in New Jersey where we see, you might see it 70 degrees for a couple of days, and then the next thing you know, the high is at 45 and it's 28 at night. We've seen that not too long ago, like last week, I think.
We did
I don't know,
have
Bob, you want to offer any thoughts there?
too.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, it sounded like Karen said all of the cap brood was removed. Is that true, Karen? So there was no capped brood left?
None. So, but our other hives still had all of their capped.
Did you
and
do a treatment at all?
We
Any
didn't.
vapors?
The main thing that we did was take the candy board off and put a liquid feeder on the top, which I now know we didn't need to do at all. We were concerned if that dripped down into it. Maybe it did smell really musty inside,
Okay.
like damp and moldy on the bottom board. So we pulled the entrance reducer off to get some more air in.
That sounds really unusual. You might want to have somebody come out and inspect the hive because Bob's right. All brood, that's something I can't say I've ever heard somebody describe before.
Yeah, it's like they wiped the whole hive clean.
Where are you, Karen?
Right outside of Philadelphia suburbs.
Okay. Are you part of a local bee club?
Yes, yeah, the Chester County.
Chester, okay. Maybe you can ping somebody who has a little experience and ask him, or call the state apiarist and ask him, just describe it to them and see if they can come out and take a peek and do an inspection with you.
Yeah, that's a
That
good
is rather unusual. Some brood,
Especially because the
as I
other hive
described.
right next to it is like great, looks totally fine, nothing unusual.
Yeah, I mean, the only other plausible thing I could think of, and again, I'm just trying to think through different things, is maybe they got into something and fed it to all the brood and then ended up having to reject what they did because they fed them something. I can't think of any other circumstance that would lead to what you had. Can't say I've ever heard that one before, where no, I know that if you put in something like a Formic Pro treatment, Formic Pro will gas the hive.
Yeah,
The bees will exit the area, but the brood can't come out of the cells, and it could damage the brood. And then when all the odors and vapors abate, they come back in and they pull all the dead brood out and clean it. But if you haven't done any of that type of thing, then that's not what's in play.
I did that back in the fall, but not recently.
Now they've been laying brood since probably January or February in your colony. Yeah, that's a head scratcher. I don't know.
So Karen, you
It is.
mentioned, do you still have a laying queen in that hive?
Yes. Yeah, it seems like they're just functioning as normal, just
Yeah.
starting back over.
It would be interesting to see what she does in the next couple of weeks, whether she begins egg laying again and starts the whole cycle. And that would kind of lean toward something happened to that brood at some point that killed it, and they carried it out. And if she starts up again and the brood are healthy, I don't know. It is a head scratcher. But I'd be curious if the colony could recover from that, Kevin. At this,
Yeah.
you know, there's plenty of time at this point, as long as she starts up again and they don't remove the next round that she lays, it could potentially recover. But I've never heard of that happening, and especially at this time of year.
It's also a chemical imbalance because part of what keeps a hive running
Yeah.
is the queen pheromone that she distributes through her direct contacts and as she's walking around.
Mhm.
But the pheromone given off by the brood when they're asking for food by sending chemical signals, and just the general premise of brood in progress gives off an odor to the entire colony that says everything's good.
Yeah.
If there's an interruption of all the brood being produced, that could potentially signal the bees erroneously or properly, I don't know, to replace your queen and do all of that too. So what I would say to you, Karen, is just make sure you watch that colony over the next couple of inspections to make sure it kicks back in and keeps going. But that
How
was
soon after emptying should I expect to see the brood? Or it's only been about like what, a week? Oh, yeah.
the other thing you can do, just thinking out loud too, is pull a frame of brood from the other colony. The brood's going to have nurse bees on it. Nurse
Yeah,
bees from one colony or loyal to the brood, not to the queen. Just make sure the queen's not on it, obviously. And
yeah,
maybe you could take that and put it in the middle of your brood nest. And that way you'll anchor the colony if you go back in and don't find brood with some brood.
that's a great idea.
Yeah, but
I
come
think-
back and tell us what happened there. I really
Yeah.
would like to know the follow-up of that one.
Is it dangerous to split the other colony? That looks great.
No,
And it's
not at all.
popping at the seams.
No, you should be clear to go to town with that.
Okay, good. Whew, thank you. I'll reach out to Chester County, see if someone can come out.
Yeah. Come join us in the next one and tell us, give us the update. We want to know the answer to that. So let me
I
come back
definitely will.
to Dan. and your questions. Does too much smoke harm the bees? It's not good for them. One of the things that I've seen is, and especially if you're completely covered in a suit, right, head to toe with gloves and everything, is you really don't understand what the bees are doing. And if you smoke and smoke and smoke and smoke, you can't tell whether you piss them off or not, other than what's flying around your veil. And so it's hard sometimes to get a read. Now, if you're only wearing a veil and you're in a t-shirt and you're not smoking or smoking too heavily, you can get a better sense of it, obviously. I think you can smoke the hive too much. And especially if it's a new hive and you smoke it too much, you could cause them to get really aggravated by it to the point where they could abscond. And the thing about it is we have to understand, like, if I said to you a bloodhound, how good can a bloodhound smell? The forecast is that a honeybee has a better sense of smell, even though they have a nose, at 500 times what a bloodhound has. So when you put smoke in the entrance, it's just a puff or two. It's not. And then you pull the roof off and you don't need to do that. It's done. Wait a moment. You'll hear a buzz. They'll get the smoke up through the hive. Everybody gets the message. And then it kind of quiets down. Tilt the roof off. Put it to the side. As you're taking the roof up, bring your smoker over and 2 puffs into the roof, into the hole. Take your hive tool. After you wait a moment, pry it up. As you pry it up, as soon as you open that gap, just 1 or 2 small puffs in the hole. Wait a second. Bees will generally retract, and then slowly lift the inner cover up. If you can, lift it away from you. That way, if bees fly out, they're going out away from you. If you lift it this way, they're going to come to your face, and they're looking for your eyes. But if you puff underneath that edge, done, it pushes the bees away from that edge when you lift it, and then you're free to lift the inner cover off. Maybe you give it a quick tap, put the bees back in, and set it aside. Now, like I said before, is you have bees all over the top. Maybe they're there and maybe they're not, depending on how much they reacted to the smoke you put in. If they're there, just give a couple and wait. You'll visibly see the bees leave and the frames will clear. Then walk to the side and go to put your hive tool in, a puff at the top of frame number 2 and a puff at the bottom of frame number 2, and go in and extract your frame. As you're working it, you don't need more smoke for a period of time. As you work and pull that first frame and you hang it, and maybe you pull the second frame, they'll still stay down. Now, some colonies, they're going to come up no matter what, and you're going to have to just keep giving them a little puff here and there. But generally, you can work frame 1, first one out, frame 2, 3, and so on. And then as you look, you'll all of a sudden see them, they come back up and they're all over the top of the frames. And you go to put your hive tool in, and there's bees there. You think, there's bees there. Get your smoker. 2 or 3 small puffs, they all retract. Puff at the top, puff at the bottom, and pull the next frame up where you're going to put your hive tool in. But it's not, full-blown smoke 15 times over the colony. You're doing that, you're gassing them. They have such a sense of smell, you do not need it. If you watch, like, my hero is Tim Schuler. He was one of our mentors, the former state apiarist of BMS. He'll take a hive tool and you'll see, or a smoker, and he'll go, and he'll put it in, you're like, did he even smoke them? And they all go in. You don't need a lot of smoke. So hopefully that gives you a sense of how much, as I described, the type of smoke that you'll apply. Now, look, sometimes they're up and in your face and you're going to smoke them. Here's the thing that I will say to you. Maybe if you're smoking them and they're not responding to the smoke, you're in the wrong time. And this is a thing where I'm going to say, is there a storm coming? Maybe the weather's changing, the barometer and the pressure's coming down or going up or changing, and they sense it. They don't want you to be open. Doesn't matter how much smoke you're going to use, they're coming. Close the hive up and get out of there. Most of us work our day job. We come home at night and you want to open the hive at 6 o'clock because that's the time. Guess what? All foragers have been out all day and they're all now home. Foragers are jaded. They've been out in the world. When you open that hive, they're going to come up and go, why is the hive open? And they're going to come after you. If you work that same hive in the middle of the day at the height of the sun, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, they'd be gentle as kittens. So sometimes it's not about the amount of smoke, but the condition that you're trying to operate in. Not a lot of sun, it's windy, you've had them open for a long time, they'll tend to get pissy. Be cognizant, be aware of what's going on and, read the situation. And if it's not a good time, close them up, come back and do them another day. Sorry, long answer, but a good opportunity to talk about the dynamics of paying attention to what you see going on while you're doing it. Is the queen inclined to fly away during inspection? No. Once she's on that comb, she's anchored. Funny thing is, you could take a comb. You didn't hear me say this, right? They always tell you pull the frame out and inspect it over the colony. I have never once seen a queen fall off of a frame. You could shake a frame. In fact, they tell you to do this. I'm not recommending it, but if you have lots and lots of bees and you're trying to find the queen and you're wondering where she's on the frame and they're clumped and they're hanging underneath, if you take that frame over your colony and you give it a little shake and the excess bees fall off, the queen will not fall off that frame. Then you're free to look at it with less bees and you'll go, up there she is. Where before she was underneath this big pile milling around in there and you never saw her. So it is extremely, extremely rare for a queen, even if you have the frame up and out, for her to decide I'm going to fly the coop. She's got one job. She'll be laying eggs while you're hanging the frame around. Now be careful setting that frame down, because when you set it down, you could knock her off into the grass or do something like that. That's why we recommend you use frame hangers. You just set it gently in the frame hanger and she'll just stay there and walk around if she happened to be on that frame. You don't risk losing her. Anything you want to add to that, Bob?
Yeah, Kevin, also a laying queen is usually too heavy to fly, right? So when the queen is ready to fly, she needs to trim down and stop laying for a period of time. So typically a laying queen, if she's going to fly, she's not going to fly far. She's going to fly and end up on the ground.
Yeah. When they want the queen to fly for a swarm, for example, they spend a week trying to slim her down so she can get back into flying shape. So I want to be cognizant of time. Usually these meetings are an hour, hour and a half. We're 5 minutes to an hour and a half. I know some of you are going to drop off and that's perfectly fine. We'll stay here and answer any other questions. And again, keep an eye out for the messages or visit the website, click on the online meeting and you'll see it. One thing I wanted to say, I forgot to mention this. I revamped the online meeting page. The last one was a train wreck as far as the design. I went with a more standard design. So hopefully when you see that next time, you go, okay, this is easier to understand. Here's the agenda, here's the connect information, and so on. I wanted to talk about, thank you for reminding me, Gina, how to light a smoker. Fundamental skill, hardest thing to grasp, but once you learn it, you'll never forget it. You have your smoker. It doesn't matter whether you have a big one or a small one. First thing I'm going to say is, I don't love the fuel that some people choose. I'm a pine needle guy. You get those pellets that come from the store. They're terrible. First off, they don't light quickly. And second off, as soon as you open the package, they absorb water and they're impossible to light. So choose the right fuel. This is the method that I would recommend you do. And you could use burlap and other substrates, but the key is it should burn for a long time and it should be dry. Other than that, it It will work. I've seen people go out into a field and collect all the dry leaves and debris and stuff it full of a smoker, and it worked perfectly fine. But pine needles are number one. Here's how you light your smoker. Take a piece of paper, newspaper. You want to take one about 8.5 by 11 size. Crumple it up and hold it over the smoker chamber and light it with your lighter and drop it in. Nearby, you want to have all of your fuel ready to go in hand's reach. You're going to reach over and grab a pinch, little pinch of pine needles, and you're going to drop it in, and you're going to give a puff. The flames will come up from the paper and it'll set the pine needles on fire. Pine needles are going to burn, almost instantly gone. As soon as the pine needles start to burn, another little pinch and put it in on top and give a pop. You should see it flame. The flames from what's burning in the chamber will come up out of the top of the, you'll see physically flames exiting the top of the smoker. When you have that, grab another pinch, maybe a little more substantial, not a wad, but a decent pinch, and put it in. At some point, when you have a lot of flames going on, you may take your hive tool and tap it in there and push that next pinch down till you see flames. Now you're starting to build it up. You have the paper in the bottom, it's burning to ash. You have 3 or 4 pinches, and you're starting to get a strata that you've packed down, but it's still loose, and it will still burn to flame come out of the pine needles. Now you're going to go get a little healthier pinch, and you're going to put it in and push it in. And when you smoke the smoker, squeeze the bellows, it may see a lot of smoke coming out, but no flames. Stoke the thing, keep doing it until you see flames break through, and then stop. I want you to also pay attention to the smoke. The smoke, when it gets heavy duty, turns from a light white to even a yellow ashen color. You'll see it, yellowish green. Stoke it again. When you see flames, go get your next pinch. This one should be a decent one, and put it in on top. Now, you're going to use a lot of fuel. I see beekeepers, they start and they have like a half cup of needles. No, I'm talking cups of needles, cups and packed, right? You're going to take a big pinch this time and put it in, and you're going to push it in, and you're going to smoke. You may or may not see flames at this point because you have a big wad of needles. But what's happening is you're building an ember layer underneath the pine needles that you put in, and you smoke and you smoke and you smoke. If you do not see flames, but you continue to see smoke and it turns white and you're with yellow, you're in a good place. Smoke it a couple times, wait a moment, count of 10. Smoke it a couple times, wait a moment, count of 10. Now go get a handful. And I mean, like you're grabbing a full cup squeezed like baseball, and you put it in and you pack it in and you puff, 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 wait a moment, puff, puff, puff. Now go get another baseball and put it in and pack it with your fist. You're not going to burn. There's no heat coming through. You're going to pack that down to the point where it's almost bulging out of the top, and then you're going to close the lid. If you take that smoker and you go out to your yard, you can work all the hives in your yard and come back and it'll still be smoking when you get done. Guarantee it. You want to have dry pine needles. You can't go over to a pine tree, pull the pine needles out, and use them. They're going to be wet and they won't light and do what I just said. You can accomplish dry pine needles in a day. Go someplace where you find a pine tree, find the pine needles, bring them home, and set them out on your driveway. One day in the sun should dry them quite extensively, and then put them in a plastic bag and put them in a garbage can or something and seal them off. You can leave them for a couple days. Obviously, if it rains, you lose. You got to put them back out again. But somewhere, put them in a thing. You ever see the draw bags that they give you at high school where you pull it and it's like a gym bag thing where it has the draw? I have one of those stacked full. That's what I use, of pine needles. That'll get me through a quarter of the season, that bag. Everybody does it differently. Now, again, you could use burlap and other things. You do the same thing. Light a piece of paper, put the burlap in, squeeze it. I've seen people take dry cardboard and roll it up in a tube and roll it and roll it and roll it until it's like this big. It fits inside. And it's just wound cardboard all the way to the center. And they light the bottom of it with a torch and they put it in and smoke it that way. It's hard to keep that lit. I wouldn't recommend doing it, but if you're really in a pinch, you could use cardboard. When you're done and you're coming back out of the apiary and you look and your smoker's still lit, what do you do with it? How do you shut it off? This is where you would use a clump of grass. Reach down and grab a big clump of grass, roll it all together in a twist, fold it over so now it looks like this, and take that and stick it in the hole. What you're doing is denying oxygen to the embers, and with the oxygen flow, it's going to stop burning. If you leave your smoker sitting up, it will continue to burn up through. When you're done with your smoker, either put the cork in, if you have one of those, you can use an everyday cork, or you could use the grass or something else, just plug the hole and lay it down. If you lay it down, it's going to burn up this way, but it won't burn this way through it. And it will burn itself out, especially if you're not puffing it. It'll burn itself out. The next time you come to use your smoker, all the fuel in there is dry because it's been subject to heat. So you could turn it over, pop the lid off, reach down in and grab all the unspent, unburned pine needles and set that aside. Get down to where the embers were, dump out the black stuff, clean it out, take your piece of paper and put it in and light it, and now take the unspent fuel that you just took out and recycle it, put it in there. It'll light just like that. It's dry as can be. One tip that I tell people, and I do this myself, where do you put your smoker when you lay it over? It's hot. It could burn the house down. Nay, you don't want to do that. I take mine and I put it on my charcoal grill. I pull the grill up, I set the smoker in there, and I close it laying down. If it's going to catch fire, it's inside the grill. It'll never burn the house down. That's where I store mine. You might also consider a box that you buy, like an ammunition box. They sell them at thrift stores. You can find them at garage sales. They make perfect smoker containers, especially if you're driving home. You put the smoker out, you put the cork in it, and you lay it down in your box, and you can drive home. Just make sure it's not laying on the hot carpet. It sets your carpet on fire. How many follow that method for lighting their smoker and using it? Anybody? Does it work for you, Scott? Does the smoker ever go out?
No, actually, I've had knock on wood pretty good luck with the smoker. And the other thing I do with my my small pinches is I put them in layers as well, so it helps speed up that strata you're talking about. And I did mention in the chat, because we're a little prone to forest fires out here, is that I always have I have a bucket of water, and if it's really windy, you know, if it's really windy, I don't go get in my hives, but if it's not too windy to get in my hives, but I'm uncomfortable, I'll go ahead. My mentor recommended sugar water. That's an alternative on, you know, just to distract them. But in the heat of the summer, and you know, my bees have been very gentle. I don't smoke that much anyways. But I do know that when you're trying to get the flame, as you mentioned, you have to work that bellows a lot more than you think you do. If if you just chug, 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 it'll go.
Yeah, the one thing I would say is if you bought a really cheap, like cheap smoker, the bellows aren't as effective as you think. If you bought a Dayton smoker, for example, from the Dayton company, that's the gold standard. When you puff that thing, the amount of air it moves through is amazing because the bellows are like engineered as good as you could possibly make them. So I like the idea about I've set the apiary on fire and ran back to the house for a hose. And I've also done that dance where you're trying to stamp it all out because I've set the grass on fire. Been there and done that. So yeah, good point there. Christoph, question?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. On my second year hive, should I be testing for mites right now? And if I find mites, what should I use to treat?
Yeah, the second year hive, first off, one thing to think about is this year's hive is a byproduct of what happened last year. And so you take that into consideration. What I mean by that is if you treated the colony in summer and you did a touch up in fall, and some people do oxalic acid vaporizations in November, December, then the starting
Yeah, I did do that.
threshold, you did?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So your threshold of mites is extremely low coming into the season. Mites are not reproducing at any clip, and you knock them down at the end of the year. So in your case, do you have to monitor and treat? Likely not. You're going to monitor, and you're going to find that you don't have high mite loads because you really knocked them down late in the season, and you should start out at a lower curve. The other thing that happens is through attrition through winter, bees die, a lot of them varroa infested, and that takes the population down, and that also takes the varroa mite population down. As soon as they start to brood up in the spring, you have all these new bees, and the varroa mites don't reproduce at the same rate. So you'll get a period of time where you get relief. The proper answer is, if you listen to pundits about this, is you should monitor all the time, monthly. And if you find your mites are above the threshold, you should treat. Pragmatically, for someone like you that treated back in November, you probably are not going to find mites until you get a little further in the season. One thing that I say to you is when you have a bigger population of bees, especially if you end up with a supreme hive, you have a lot of mites and you should be monitoring. But when they start out in the beginning of the year with a smaller population, moderate or booming, then the larger they get, the more you want to keep track of monitoring. So the proper answer, though, Christoph, is monitor all the time. I want you to monitor once a month and treat accordingly. But my practical matter is, I know most beekeepers just don't do that. And given that you treated just recently, I don't think you have to do it.
Okay. And a follow-up, what is a good time, roughly to put on supers?
In the mid-Atlantic region, anywhere after April 1st. And let's go back to runty hive, moderate hive, booming hive. The booming hive, April 1st or second week of April. And when you see all these trees in bloom, especially the apple trees, you're going to need your honey supers on. You want to stay ahead of them. And they can tolerate that extra space up on top where the heat goes up because they have a booming colony. A moderate sized colony, I would say, might be a touch early. Next week or the week after, read the weather and read the trees where you are. A little colony, it's not time yet. Let them get to critical mass and then judge accordingly.
Right. And then one more question on the supers. I have plastic foundation, and last year they did not build any of them, but it's probably because the hive was just not ready. But what's the best way to prep the plastic foundation for them to build it out?
Yeah, so one of the things you want to do for plastic is go look at that wonky comb thing that I just posted, but I'm going to tell you some of the tips in it. Plastic that hasn't been built and sitting in storage may pick up odors and other things. And the other thing is, in the cool weather, it's going to be cold. Ideally, and you're on the right track already, make sure it has a good wax coating. Make sure every edge of the rim of all the cells in the plastic emboss is covered with plastic or with wax from the top of the frame to the bottom, from the side to the side.
And
Those spots.
how do you best do this? This is like, I mean, it came coated, but it it's
Yeah,
a year
I know.
old, so I probably have to redo it somehow. What's the best way to do
So
it?
you should have an operation where you have some excess wax. Just melt it in a pot and use a roller or a brush and lightly just brush it across the frames. Don't
Okay.
fill the bottom. You're not looking to saturate the frame and fill the bottom of the cup.
Right.
You just want it on the outside ridge,
On the edge, yeah.
all the face. And then the other thing is, before you put it in the hive, either have it in the house, make sure it's room temperature, or set it out in the sun and let the box warm up and then put it on. If you put the wax and the plastic that's cold on top of the hive, it takes time for the heat to rise up and warm that all up before the bees will come up. Warm wax smell will draw the bees up in and it'll help them find that and build it out for you.
Okay, thank you.
Kevin, did you want to talk about drawing foundation above a queen excluder? I don't know if Christoph uses a queen excluder or
Yes.
not.
Yes.
Oh, there you go. You want to talk about that,
Yeah,
Kevin?
good point. Queen excluders are a no-go for foundation above it. The bees are reticent to cross a queen excluder when there's wax and other things up above, but they generally will be deterred 100% by going through the queen excluder. They'll see that as a non-starter. Good point, Bob. If you are putting plastic foundation up above a brood nest, take the queen excluder out. Queen's not going to go up in there anyway. There's nothing for her to do. There's no comb. So we recommend that you leave the queen excluder off. That's in, if you look at the honey supering lesson, which is right now for you, that's in that lesson. It tells you not to do that.
Okay.
No queen excluders.
Okay. Yeah,
Good
I'll
point,
take a look. Great.
You know, I don't always remember everything, but the lessons are really comprehensive. And to that point, if you went to the lesson, you would have discovered, don't use a queen excluder. It's in there when you're adding your honey supers. And what I just told you is in that lesson.
Great.
I didn't think of it, but it's in there. So,
Thank you.
so I'll just reiterate again, we're 15 minutes past stop time, but I'm happy to stay here and answer any other questions. You can sign off with no shame. We'll be happy to, anybody have questions about attending Northwest this weekend, feel free to ask. Did anybody just get the message because we sent it out through Northwest? Is that how you learned about the meeting? Anyone from the Northwest newsletter? Could have asked that earlier, I suppose. Okay. Yeah, Jason. Or is that a buy? You found it on Northwest calendar. Good. Okay. Yeah, you know, the in-person meetings, we've mentioned this, but the communication from Northwest has been primarily about the pre-scheduled program. They haven't said too much. So I sent the message about the managed mentoring program out. If you're coming from Northwest and you weren't familiar that we had a program, go to managementoring.com like the instruction said, and click on the start here and submit your information. We send messages to all the management mentoring participants about all these, and you'll get the notification from there. And more specifically, stuff about this program, Managed Mentoring versus, maybe I don't plan to send it all the time out of the Northwest list, just every once in a while in case we miss somebody and they slip through the cracks, we'll make sure they know, but the primary message is going to come out of this website. So good. Thanks, Dan, for letting me know that. Okay. I think questions have slowed. I'll do last call. Anything anybody want to talk about? Doesn't have to be a question. Commentary about what you've seen. I will share if anybody wants to hear what happened with the bees during the eclipse. I went out, set a camera up, and filmed it. I'm actually going to post it to the YouTube channel this weekend. I filmed 15 minutes before, through it, and 15 minutes after. And it's really kind of cool because when I went out in the beginning, like a half hour before to set everything up, they were roiling. It was business as usual, and they were really going to town. At the 15-minute before, when the eclipse had started, they didn't slow down at all. They were still going really well. It said on the NASA website that for our location, the pinnacle would be at 326. That's kind of a gauge, is my guess, because at 326, they were still flying. But what happened is from like 315 to 326, they all came back. It's like as it got dark, they all returned to the hive, and there was a massive entry into the colony. And then right at the pinnacle, everything stopped. There were hundreds of bees on the entrance and on the ground, coming in. And then it trickled to a slow, and then there were maybe 50 bees, and then there were 5 bees at the entrance. They never completely stopped. I don't know if we were in complete totality, whether that would have changed. Some bees were still just a handful, maybe a dozen at most, were flying around, but it completely got quiet and stopped. The birds stopped going. It was really weird to sit out there and hear this. And then once the sun came back, they started coming out, and you'd see them like looking around, doing whatever. And they're like, well, look, it's light again. I don't know what's going on, but then they picked back up. But the cloud cover came in over our area as the sun came back, and they didn't go back out with the same amount of vigor as they were coming back. So, and when you watch the video, it's kind of cool. Like you see all this stuff going on. I took a 30-minute video and shrunk it to 1 minute, and it goes and I stopped it at totality. You can see there's no bees flying around. It's completely stopped. And then I turned it back on, and you see the activity ramp. It was cool. I'm waiting to hear what all the broodminder stuff is going to show, because they sent those BDARs out all along the line of totality, and it'll be really neat to see what they learn. But I remember last time I was at work hearing all the people talk about the eclipse and what happened and some of the reports. So I was excited this time not to miss it. And the video is really cool. So, okay, gonna do last call here. Feel free to make any comment. Otherwise, gonna shut it down and say thanks for coming. And look for the notice. We'll be back in a couple weeks. It's already posted, the details for the Connect. And as you get your bees, I'm sure you're going to load up your questions, and we appreciate you coming back and asking us. And, please just do one thing. Try to tell other people about the program. Be happy to have them. When you go out to bee meetings or whatever it is you have going on, let them know we're here. We'd be happy to have them. So, Emily, bring a suit, bring a snack, bring a drink, bring a friend. There's no, sometimes that place has porta potties, but the Boy Scouts I don't think are active yet, so they're not there. So If you need a restroom, you have to like hop in your car and ride out to McDonald's in Clinton. So just keep that in mind. But for the most part, just bring a suit and bring yourself, and we got the rest. And I'll remember wax. Bring wax. Okay. Slowly but surely, folks are tapering off again. Thanks for coming out. Appreciate it. Have a good night, everybody. And I'll close the meeting down. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.